Bruce Lee once destroyed a man so completely in a fight that he immediately declared his own victory worthless. I know that sounds backwards. The greatest martial artist in history wins the most important fight of his life and then calls himself a failure? But here's the twisted part. He spent the next 9 years of his life trying to bury this story, not because he was ashamed of winning, because of what winning revealed about his own weakness. December 5th, 1964, Oakland, California. Behind locked doors in a small kung fu school, two men faced each other with 10 witnesses watching. One was Bruce Lee, just 24 years old, already branded a traitor by the traditional martial arts community. His crime: teaching Chinese fighting secrets to non-Chinese students. The other man was Wong Jack Man, a respected master from San Francisco's Chinatown, sent to destroy Bruce's reputation and shut down his school forever. The challenge was brutal in its simplicity. If Bruce lost, he had to close his school, stop teaching foreigners, and abandon everything he believed in. If he won, the traditional masters would leave him alone. But winning came with a price nobody expected. No rules, no referees, fight until someone couldn't continue. No cameras, no recordings. Just 10 people whose memories would later contradict each other so violently that even today, nobody agrees on what actually happened in that room. The fight lasted 8 minutes. Bruce Lee won. Wong Jack Man ended up on the floor, exhausted, unable to defend himself. Victory was clear. The witnesses saw it. But the moment the fight ended, Bruce Lee said something that shocked everyone in that room. He said, "This fight should have been over in 10 seconds. My techniques are inefficient. My conditioning is weak. If there had been weapons, if there had been multiple opponents, I would be dead right now." His students were confused. The traditional masters were stunned. Bruce had just proven he was better than their champion, and he was criticizing himself. But Bruce was deadly serious. And here's what nobody knew until years later. 3 days after the fight, Bruce Lee secretly met with Wong Jack Man and made a deal. A deal to deliberately spread conflicting stories about what happened. A deal that would protect both of them. A deal that turned this fight into martial arts' greatest mystery. This is not the story of how Bruce Lee won a fight. This is the story of how winning a fight destroyed everything Bruce Lee thought he knew about martial arts, and how that destruction created Jeet Kune Do, changed Hollywood forever, and revealed a truth that most fighters never learn, that your greatest enemy is never the person standing in front of you. It's your own satisfaction with who you currently are. What happened in those 8 minutes didn't just change Bruce Lee, it changed martial arts forever. And the real story, the one Bruce tried to hide, is darker and more fascinating than any legend. Main script, The Forbidden Fight Chapter 1, The Cultural Chrometo Understand. Why this fight happened. You need to step back into a world that no longer exists. 1960 for America. Oakland, California. A city divided not just by race, but by invisible walls of tradition that had stood for centuries. In San Francisco's Chinatown, just 40 miles away, Chinese martial arts masters operated in the shadows. They taught their students in cramped rooms above restaurants, in basement studios, in private homes, and they taught only Chinese students. Always only Chinese students. This wasn't racism. This was something deeper. For these masters, Kung Fu wasn't just fighting. It was sacred knowledge. It was cultural identity preserved through blood and sweat across generations. Masters would spend 30 years perfecting a single technique, and they would only pass it to students whose loyalty had been tested for decades. The idea of teaching these secrets to outsiders wasn't just wrong. It was unthinkable. It was cultural suicide. Bruce Lee didn't see it that way. At 24 years old, he had already broken so many rules that the traditional community had lost count. He had married Linda, a white woman, which was scandalous enough that was personal. What he was doing now was public. He had opened his Jun Fan Kung Fu Institute right there on Broadway Street in Oakland, with a sign anyone could see. And inside that school, white students trained alongside black students, alongside Chinese students. Everyone learning together. Everyone equal. To Bruce, This made perfect sense. He believed that fighting techniques were like mathematics, universal truths that worked the same way regardless of who used them. A punch was a punch. Physics didn't care about your ethnicity, but to the traditional masters watching from Chinatown, what Bruce was doing looked like betrayal. He was taking their cultural heritage and handing it to strangers. He was turning sacred knowledge into a commodity. And worst of all, he was proving that it worked. His students were getting good, really good, which meant he couldn't be dismissed as a fool. He was a threat. The masters had been watching Bruce for months. They sent people to observe his classes from outside. They questioned his few Chinese students about what he was teaching. They debated among themselves about what to do. Some argued for patience. Bruce was young. Maybe he would mature and see the error of his ways. But others argued that every day he continued teaching was another day their secrets spread further. Every non-Chinese student he trained was another violation of everything their teachers had died to protect. Finally, they made a decision. They would give Bruce one chance to stop, one formal warning, and if he refused, they would challenge him. Not to hurt him, though that might happen. Not even primarily to stop him, though they hoped to do that too. They would challenge him to make a statement, to show every other Chinese martial artist in America what happened when you betrayed the old ways. They needed to make an example, and Bruce Lee was going to be that example. Chapter 2, The Message, Edinburgh 1st, 1964. A Tuesday afternoon that started like any other. Bruce was teaching an intermediate class. About 15 students, most of them non-Chinese, working on trapping techniques from Wing Chun. Bruce was in his element, moving between students, correcting hand positions, demonstrating the subtle mechanics that made the techniques work. His students loved these classes. Bruce didn't just teach movements. He taught principles. He explained why each technique worked, what physical laws it exploited, how to adapt it if circumstances changed. The door opened. Everyone looked up. A young Chinese man stood in the doorway, 19, maybe 20 years old. Traditional Chinese clothing, which nobody wore in Oakland unless they were making a statement. He moved through the class like they weren't there, walked straight up to Bruce, extended his hand holding an envelope. Red wax seal. Expensive paper. Bruce took it. The young man turned and left without speaking a single word. The class had stopped completely. Everyone watching. Bruce looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then he broke the seal and pulled out the letter inside. Traditional Chinese characters. Formal, classical language. Bruce read it silently. One of his Chinese students, seeing Bruce's expression, asked what it said. Bruce handed it to him, translated for everyone. The student read aloud, translating as he went. The letter was from the Chinese martial arts community of San Francisco. It stated that Bruce Lee was violating codes of conduct established over centuries. It stated that he was dishonoring Chinese martial arts by teaching them to non-Chinese people. It demanded he stop immediately, and it concluded with a warning. If Bruce continued, he would be formally challenged, and when he lost that challenge, he would be required to close his school and never teach non-Chinese students again. The class erupted, students talking over each other, some angry, some worried, some asking if this was serious. Bruce held up his hand for silence. Then he did something nobody expected. He laughed, not nervously, not bitterly, a genuine laugh of amusement. He folded the letter carefully, put it in his pocket, and said, "All right." Where were we? I believe we were working on Pax-out transitions, but his students noticed something. For the rest of that class, Bruce's techniques were different, faster, sharper, more intense, like something had been unlocked. After class, several students stayed to ask Bruce if he was worried. He told them he wasn't. He told them that pressure reveals truth. If what I'm teaching works, he said, this will prove it. If it doesn't work, better to find out now than to keep teaching something false. Chapter 3. The challenger arrived 2 days later. Thursday afternoon, Bruce was teaching a private lesson when the door opened again. This time, 6 men entered. No knocking. No announcement. They just walked in like they owned the place. Bruce's student immediately felt the atmosphere change. These men weren't here for a conversation. The man in front was Wong Jack Man, late 20s, tall and lean with the build of someone who had trained seriously for years. He had a reputation in San Francisco's Chinatown, Northern Shaolin specialist, fast hands, classical technique, and something more important than skill. He was known as a man of honor. When he gave his word, he kept it. When he accepted a challenge, he showed up. The traditional masters had chosen him carefully. They didn't want a hot head. They wanted someone who would represent them with dignity. Wong Jack Man spoke in Cantonese. His voice was calm but formal. Bruce Lee, I come on behalf of the traditional martial arts community of San Francisco. You received a warning. You ignored it. There is now only one way to resolve this matter. I challenge you. If you win, we will not interfere with your school again. If I win, you must close your school and stop teaching non-Chinese students. Do you accept? Bruce looked at Wong Jack Man for a long moment, sizing him up, reading his stance, his breathing, his energy. Then Bruce responded, also in Cantonese, I accept, but not today. Come back Saturday, December 5th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Wong Jack Man nodded. Saturday, 2 o'clock. We will bring witnesses. You may do the same. Then he and his 5 companions turned and left. After they were gone, Bruce's student asked the question that was burning in his mind. Are you worried? Bruce turned to him with an expression the student would never forget. Worried? No. Curious? Yes. Saturday will teach me something important, either about Wong Jack Man's abilities or about my own limitations. Either way, I'll learn something valuable. That response revealed everything about how Bruce approached fighting. He wasn't preparing to prove he was better. He was preparing to test his hypotheses about combat. This wasn't personal for Bruce. It was scientific. Wong Jack Man was going to be his experiment. Chapter 4. The long Friday. Bruce didn't tell many people about the challenge. He didn't announce it to his students. He didn't brag to his friends. He simply prepared. But his preparation was strange. His wife Linda noticed it first. Bruce wasn't drilling complex combinations or fancy techniques. He was working basics, straight punches, footwork, timing, the simplest, most fundamental movements, over and over until they became automatic. Linda asked him why he was training this way. Because, Bruce said, complex techniques fail under pressure. When someone is really trying to hurt you, you don't have time to think. You need movements so basic, so deeply ingrained that they happen automatically. Wong Jack Man will come at me with techniques he's practiced for 20 years. Beautiful techniques. Classical techniques. My advantage isn't that my techniques are better. My advantage is that mine are simpler. Friday night, Bruce barely slept. Not from anxiety. His mind was running combat scenarios. What if Wong Jack Man was faster than expected? What if his traditional training gave him advantages Bruce hadn't considered? What if Bruce's unconventional approach had blind spots? These weren't fears. They were variables to consider. By 3 a.m., Bruce had mentally fought Wong Jack Man 100 different ways. He had identified 3 probable strategies Wong Jack Man might use, and he had planned responses for each. Saturday morning arrived grey and cold. Bruce woke at dawn. Light stretching. Small breakfast. Mental preparation. He told Linda not to come to the school. This might get ugly, he said. I don't want you to see me like that. Linda wanted to protest, but she saw something in Bruce's eyes. This was serious, possibly dangerous. She kissed him and made him promise to be careful. Bruce smiled. Careful? Where's the learning in that? At 1:30, Bruce arrived at his school. The building was quiet, empty. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The afternoon light came through the windows at an angle, creating long shadows. Bruce began preparing the space. He moved all the equipment to the walls, pushed the training bags into corners, cleared everything from the center of the room, created an open space roughly 20 feet by 20 feet. Then he sat down in the middle of that empty space and waited. Chapter 5. 10 witnesses at exactly 2 o'clock, Wong Jack Man arrived. But he didn't come alone. 5 martial artists accompanied him, the same men from Thursday. Behind them came 2 older men, traditional masters, senior figures from the Chinatown martial arts community. Bruce understood immediately. This wasn't going to be private. The traditional community wanted documentation. They wanted witnesses who could testify that everything had been fair. That Wong Jack Man had won legitimately. That Bruce Lee had been given every chance and had lost anyway. Bruce didn't object. He simply gestured for them to enter. The 7 men came inside and positioned themselves along the walls. They stood in silence, watching, waiting. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Then, just as it seemed the fight was about to begin, Bruce heard voices outside. The door opened again. 3 of Bruce's students stood there. "Saifu," one of them said. "We heard. Can we watch?" Bruce looked at them for a long moment. He hadn't told them. Someone had talked. Word had gotten out. Bruce glanced at Wong Jack Man, who shrugged slightly. If Bruce could have witnesses, fine. Bruce nodded to his students. They entered quietly and positioned themselves on the opposite wall from the traditional masters. Now there were 10 people in that room. 10 witnesses who would spend the next 50 years disagreeing about what they saw. 10 people whose memories would be filtered through loyalty, through bias, through the simple fact that human beings cannot accurately process violence in real time. These 10 people would create a legend. But right now, they were just 10 people holding their breath. Wong Jack Man stepped into the center of the cleared space. He removed his jacket, folding it carefully and handing it to one of his companions. Underneath he wore a simple black training uniform. He began his warm-up. Traditional forms, northern Shaolin patterns. His movements were textbook perfect. Every strike precisely placed. Every stance exactly as the classical texts described. Watching him warm up was like watching a master calligrapher. Each movement was art. Bruce Lee did not warm up. He simply stood at the opposite end of the space, watching still. One of his students would later say that Bruce looked like a coiled spring. Not tense, not anxious, just compressed. Potential energy waiting to become kinetic. When Wong Jack Man finished his warm-up, he settled into a traditional stance and nodded at Bruce. Bruce nodded back. One of the elderly masters stepped forward. He spoke in Cantonese, announcing the rules. No strikes to eyes, throat, or groin. Fight continues until one man submits or cannot continue. Both fighters acknowledged the rules with a nod. The master looked at both men. Then he said one word. Begin. Chapter 6. The first 3-minute test. Neither man moved. They circled slowly. 15 feet apart. Too far to strike. Close enough to react. Wong Jack Man's stance was classical. Weight balanced 50-50 between both legs. Hands at precise angles for optimal defense. His form was museum quality. Bruce's stance was different. Lower. Weight constantly shifting. Hands moving in small, unpredictable patterns. It looked wrong to anyone trained in traditional styles. But that was the point. Wong Jack Man struck first. A straight punch, fast and clean, aimed at Bruce's center line. Testing. Probing for reaction speed. Bruce slipped it with minimal movement. Just enough. The punch passed harmlessly by his shoulder. Bruce didn't counter. He simply reset and continued circling. Wong Jack Man attacked again. This time a combination. High punch, low kick. Classical 2-level attack designed to split defensive attention. Bruce blocked the punch and checked the kick. Still no counter. Just defense and observation. The traditional masters along the wall nodded approvingly. Wong Jack Man's technique was impeccable. But Bruce's students were seeing something different. Bruce wasn't just defending. He was reading. His eyes never left Wong Jack Man's center. He was watching weight shifts. Watching the subtle tells that precede every technique. Wong Jack Man was fighting. Bruce was studying. Wong Jack Man increased his pace. He launched a series of attacks, hands and feet flowing together, advancing, pressuring, trying to force Bruce backward, trying to create panic. And Bruce gave ground. He retreated, absorbing the pressure, his defense tight and efficient. To the traditional masters, It looked like their champion was winning. Wong Jack Man was moving forward. Bruce was moving backward. Clear dominance, but then Bruce stopped retreating. It happened between one heartbeat and the next. Wong Jack Man threw another straight punch, the same technique he'd been using successfully. But this time was different. Bruce's hand shot forward and intercepted the punch mid-flight, trapping Wong Jack Man's wrist. Before Wong Jack Man could process what was happening, Bruce had closed the distance. He was inside Wong Jack Man's defensive perimeter, close enough to smell his breath. What happened next was an explosion. Bruce unleashed a barrage of straight punches, short, direct, brutal, all from close range where Wong Jack Man's longer techniques couldn't function. Wong Jack Man tried to create distance, tried to push back to his preferred range, but Bruce followed him like a shadow. Every time Wong Jack Man retreated a step, Bruce advanced a step, maintaining the claustrophobic distance, not giving him room to breathe. The traditional master shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how challenge matches were supposed to go. Where was the exchange of classical techniques? Where was the demonstration of form? This looked like street fighting. This looked like survival. Wong Jack Man, to his credit, adapted quickly. He stopped trying to retreat in straight lines, started moving laterally, circling, using angles to try to escape the pressure. He threw checking kicks to try to maintain distance, but every time he created space, Bruce closed it. Every time he started to set up a classical technique, Bruce interrupted it before it could develop. The fight had been going for about 3 minutes now. Both men were breathing hard, but Wong Jack Man was breathing much harder. He was discovering something devastating. All his years of training had been predicated on one assumption, that he would have time and space to execute his techniques. But Bruce wasn't giving him time, wasn't giving him space. And without time and space, all those beautiful classical techniques became worthless. Chapter 7, The Chase Around the 4-minute mark. Wong Jack Man made a desperate decision. He couldn't win this fight standing and trading with Bruce. He needed to change the game entirely. He suddenly dropped his level and dove for Bruce's legs. A takedown attempt, not part of Northern Shaolin training. Pure desperation. But desperation can be effective. Bruce sprawled, spreading his legs and dropping his weight to defend. He wrapped his arms around Wong Jack Man's upper body and started hammering short strikes to the back of his head and neck. Wong Jack Man released the takedown and tried to create separation. But as he disengaged, Bruce pursued. And that's when the fight became chaos. Wong Jack Man began moving around the room, not in circles, in desperate patterns, trying to use furniture as obstacles, trying to find any angle that would give him a moment to reset. And Bruce chased him. The witnesses had to press themselves against the walls. As the two fighters careened around the space, equipment was knocked over. Furniture was displaced. What had started as a formal challenge match now looked like a bar fight. One of Bruce's students would later describe this phase as the most frightening thing he'd ever witnessed. He said watching Bruce chase Wong Jack Man was like watching a predator pursue prey. No wasted motion, no excess aggression, just relentless, efficient pursuit. Wong Jack Man threw everything he had left. Spinning kicks, jumping techniques, combinations that would have looked spectacular in a demonstration. Some of them even landed, but they didn't stop Bruce. They didn't even slow him down. Around the 6-minute mark, Wong Jack Man's movements started to break down. His techniques became sloppy, his footwork uncertain, his breathing ragged and desperate. He was exhausted, but he kept fighting, kept moving, kept trying. And then his back hit the wall. Nowhere left to go. Bruce stood in front of him, blocking all escape routes. This was the moment. The fight could end right here. Bruce loaded up for what looked like a finishing combination. But then one of the elderly traditional masters shouted, "Enough. This has been proven." Bruce stopped, his fist literally inches from Wong Jack Man's face. He stepped back, breathing hard, looking at the master who had spoken. Wong Jack Man, pinned against the wall, slumped slightly. Relief and humiliation mixed on his face. The master stepped forward. The challenge has been answered. There is no need to continue to injury. The room seemed to relax. It was over. But then Bruce spoke. One word. No. Chapter 8, the final exchange. Bruce turned back to Wong Jack Man, ignored the master completely, spoke directly to his opponent in Cantonese. We agreed to fight until one man cannot continue. Can you continue? The room went silent. Wong Jack Man, still leaning against the wall, looked at Bruce. A long, measuring look. Then he pushed himself off the wall, straightened up, raised his hands into a fighting position even though they were trembling with exhaustion. He nodded. He could continue. The traditional master tried to object. Bruce cut him off. This is between him and me. Wong Jack Man moved back toward the center of the room, his arms visibly shaking, his legs unsteady, but his eyes determined. Bruce didn't attack immediately. He waited, gave Wong Jack Man time to set his stance, time to prepare. This wasn't cruelty. This was respect. Bruce was giving his opponent the chance to face the end with dignity. The witnesses were absolutely silent. This wasn't about styles anymore. This wasn't about tradition versus innovation. This was about will, about who wanted it more. Wong Jack Man attacked first. A final, desperate lunging punch with every ounce of energy he had remaining. Bruce slipped it, trapped the arm, swept Wong Jack Man's legs. Wong Jack Man fell hard to the wooden floor. Bruce followed him down, established a dominant position, ready to finish, but he didn't strike. He looked down at Wong Jack Man and asked quietly in Cantonese, "Are you finished?" Wong Jack Man, pinned, unable to escape, looked back at Bruce. The witnesses would later disagree about what happened next. Some said Wong Jack Man verbally submitted. Others said he simply stopped resisting and nodded. But everyone agreed on one thing. The fight was over. Bruce Lee had won. Chapter 9, the impossible response. Bruce stood slowly, breathing hard, soaked in sweat, but uninjured. Wong Jack Man remained on the floor for several seconds. Then, with help from his companions, he got to his feet. One of the traditional masters approached Bruce. He bowed deeply. "You have proven your point. We will not challenge you again." Bruce didn't bow back. He said something that nobody expected. "I didn't prove my point. I proved that I have much to learn." Every person in the room stared at him. Wong Jack Man, still catching his breath, looked at Bruce like he'd spoken gibberish. Bruce looked at his own hands, flexed them, examined them. Then he spoke again, more to himself than to the witnesses. "That fight took too long. Should have been over in seconds. My techniques were inefficient. My conditioning inadequate. If Wong Jack Man had been armed, if there had been multiple opponents, I would have been in trouble." Wong Jack Man's expression transformed from exhaustion to disbelief. He had just been beaten decisively, and his opponent was criticizing his own performance. The traditional masters didn't know how to respond. They left quietly, taking Wong Jack Man with them. Bruce's students stayed. One asked if he was happy about winning. Bruce didn't answer. He sat down heavily, his body finally showing the exhaustion he'd suppressed during the fight. He said something his students would never forget. "Starting Monday, everything changes. What I've been teaching is too complicated for real fighting. We need to rebuild from scratch, simpler, more direct, more efficient." After everyone left, Bruce locked the door, stood alone in his destroyed school. Equipment scattered, furniture displaced, scuff marks on the walls. He didn't clean up. He just stood there, replaying the fight, analyzing every mistake, every wasted motion, every inefficiency. He realized something profound. In a real fight, there's no time for beauty, no time for classical forms, only what works and what doesn't. And much of what he'd been teaching didn't work efficiently enough. When Linda arrived that evening, she found Bruce sitting in the dark. She asked how it went. "I won," he said. No pride, no satisfaction. She asked what was wrong. Bruce looked at her. "I won today, but someday I might face someone better, and with my current level, I might lose. That's not acceptable." Chapter 10, The Secret. 3 days later. Bruce Lee did something almost nobody knows about. He contacted Wong Jack Man, arranged a private meeting. One witness present, a mutual acquaintance. Bruce told Wong Jack Man he respected his courage, respected his skill. Then Bruce made a strange request. Don't talk about the details of the fight publicly. Tell people it was close, inconclusive, a matter of interpretation. Wong Jack Man was confused. Why? You won decisively. Bruce explained. If people believe I destroyed you, it creates problems. I'll become a target for every traditional master wanting to prove their style is superior. I'll spend the rest of my life fighting challenge matches. But more than that, you fought with honor. You accepted defeat with dignity. There's no need to humiliate you publicly. Bruce suggested that if the story remained ambiguous, it would benefit both of them. The traditional community could save face. Bruce could avoid becoming a constant target, and a real lesson of the fight, the need for martial arts to evolve, could be pursued without controversy. Wong Jack Man thought about this. Then he agreed. A handshake, an understanding between warriors, no written contract, just mutual respect. This is why, for the next 50 years, people would tell completely different versions of what happened, not because they were lying, but because Bruce and Wong Jack Man deliberately created ambiguity. The fight became a legend precisely because nobody could agree on the details, and that ambiguity protected both men. After December 1964, Bruce's approach to martial arts transformed completely. He stopped teaching Wing Chun as a system, started teaching principles instead: directness, simplicity, efficiency, speed. He began studying Western boxing, fencing, wrestling. Anything that worked. He trained obsessively, not to prove he was the best, to discover how much better he could become, the physical conditioning that made him famous, the explosive speed, the philosophical depth. All of it traces back to those 8 minutes with Wong Jack Man. The fight didn't make Bruce Lee a legend. The fight showed him how far he was from being a legend. And that gap, that painful awareness of his own limitations, drove him to become something greater. When Bruce died in 1973, Wong Jack Man attended the funeral. He bowed to Bruce's casket. Someone asked what he was praying for. "I'm thanking him," Wong Jack Man said, "for teaching me about my own limitations, the final truth." So, what's the real secret of the fight Bruce Lee tried to hide? It wasn't the fight itself. It wasn't who won or how long it lasted. The secret was what winning revealed. That defeating an opponent is easy compared to transcending your own limitations. That victory can be your greatest teacher if you're humble enough to learn from it. That your real enemy is never the person in front of you. It's your satisfaction with who you currently are. Wong Jack Man wasn't Bruce Lee's enemy. He was Bruce Lee's catalyst. The fight lasted 8 minutes, but those 8 minutes changed everything. They destroyed Bruce's confidence in traditional techniques. They exposed weaknesses he didn't know he had. They forced him to question everything. And from that destruction, from that brutal self-examination, Jeet Kune Do was born, not a style, a philosophy. The idea that the best fighter isn't the one who knows the most techniques. It's the one who can adapt to any situation, who can flow like water into whatever space appears, who never stops evolving, never stops questioning, never stops growing. That's what Bruce Lee learned from Wong Jack Man. Not how to win, how to keep improving even after winning. And that lesson, that permanent hunger for growth, is what transformed a skilled martial artist into a legend that changed the world. The fight of December 5th, 1964 wasn't Bruce Lee's greatest victory. It was his greatest education. And a diploma from that education was written in sweat, written in exhaustion, written in the humility of knowing that winning doesn't mean mastering. It just means you've passed one test, and there are always more tests ahead.